Let's begin with the prayer. Master of all worlds, highest power, merciful parent of compassion, in your presence, eternal one, source of strength for us as you have been for our ancestors, we very humbly acknowledge you. What are we? What is our life? You have done such great kindness to us. Therefore, we place our appeals before you so that you may forgive and absolve us of all our faults and failings. Let our faults never become barriers between us and you. May it be your desire to prepare our hearts to feel awe and love for you. May you listen to these words of ours. And may you open our encumbered hearts to the mysteries of your Torah. May this, our study, be a source of pleasure before your throne of glory, like sweet incense. May you shower down upon us the light of our soul's source in all the ways by which we define ourselves. May the sparks of your holy servants, through whom you have revealed these words to the world, shine and sparkle. May their merit, their ancestors' merit, their Torah, their innocence, and their holiness stand for us, prevent us from stumbling when we study these words. Their merit, may our eyes be illumined by what we study, as in the saying of the sweet Son of Israel. Open my eyes, that I may gaze the wonders of your Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart
be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer.
For it is the eternal
who grants us wisdom.
It is from his mouth that knowledge and understanding issue forth. Na 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 na. Ah na na na. Na 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 na. Ah na na na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na na na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Ah na 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 na. Ah na na na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na na na. Ah na 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 na. Ah na 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 na. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. We're on page 358. We're in the middle of the Zohar's discussion about comparing Joseph and Benjamin, the two sons of Rachel. And we called them on the previous page, they're both righteous. One is the righteous one above, that's Joseph, and one is the righteous one below, and that's Benjamin. So now the Zohar is trying to justify this idea that Benjamin should be called the righteous one, which is less known than Joseph. Joseph is called Joseph HaTzadik in rabbinic literature already, so that's a given. But what about Benjamin? So at the last paragraph on the previous page, we have the answer that why was he called righteous? Because the whole time Jacob was mourning over Joseph, he did not perform in bed. That Benjamin, in solidarity and with his father's pain, withdrew from conjugal relations, and that was, in the Zohar's viewpoint here, essential to the idea of righteousness. Joseph is called righteous because he refrains from engaging in sexual relations with Potiphar's wife. That's what earns him the title righteous. So refraining from sexual activity is here the Zohar's main factor in giving a person the title righteous or not. Unpacking that, we can try to do that a little bit later if we want, but here we have more details to deal with. So we're on page 358, following up on this line of thought, that we're giving Benjamin this title because of his own ascetic behavior of refraining from conjugal relations. So the Zohar is not so convinced that this makes sense because it wants to get the whole picture fully understood and challenges the idea. 358, top of the page. Does anybody here want to read? All right, go ahead. Did we record? Did we start recording? I forgot.
You said we did.
Okay, good. All right.
Now you might say when Joseph was snatched from Jacob, he was just a child, unmarried. Yet, you say he did not perform in bed. However, even though he later coupled, he did not want to perform in bed.
Okay, so this is a question and an answer. He here is Benjamin. And the first line says, when Joseph was snatched from Jacob, you're saying Benjamin from that time on refrained from sexual relations. He was a kid. So what are you saying? Oh, what a righteous person he was. He was able, he withdrew from these kinds of experiences and pleasures to be in suffering along with his father. Why should he get credit for that? He was a kid. He wasn't even eligible for this. He wasn't even married yet. So what's the praise that you're heaping on Benjamin? So what's the answer? What's the answer? The answer is the last sentence in this paragraph.
Do you want me to read?
However, yeah, we read it. However, even though he later coupled, he did not want to perform in bed. So what's our answer?
He
Seems
did
like
it
a
only,
little
he did
credit
it just
in
as
advance.
a matter of conjugal duty, but not out
Yeah.
of any desire.
Okay, yeah, Meryl, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was going to say that, but just to sort of pick up on some of my questions about this. And I'm not trying to be funny or facetious or anything, but I remember when we were talking about honor thy father and mother. If you can't do it for one of many reasons, you can make sure it's done by somebody else. So I'm wondering, does that apply to other mitzvot? Does that apply to this mitzvot? You know, if you won't or can't, could you have somebody perform that mitzvah for you?
So the short answer is, depends what kind of mitzvah we're talking about. There are mitzvot begufo and mitzvot she'enan begufo. There are mitzvahs that are inherent in your own body and embodiment, and there are other mitzvot that are not. So for instance, giving tzedakah. Giving tzedakah is a mitzvah, right? But it's not a mitzvah that your hand should place the money into the hand of the other person, right? You can instruct somebody, you have a bank account, you can tell the bank, just transfer funds into somebody else's account. There's no bodily element to it. So you can have somebody else just be your agent to discharge the mitzvah, right? So when it comes to kibud av va'em, making sure that your parents are treated properly and that they preserve their dignity as much as possible, it's not that you personally have to hold the walker for them as they hold on to the walker, right? You have to make sure that they're treated with respect and that they have the wherewithal to live a life of dignity and not be, beleaguered with poverty and all the other degradations. So if you can do it, then you have all that emotional connection and so on, and then it works both ways. But if it's what you were alluding to is when that doesn't, factor into it, it's not possible to do that. Then arranging things for other people to make sure that your parents are taken care of is totally legitimate, right? So that's not a body requirement. But for instance, taking a lulav and etrog, it says, take it in your hand. You have to take the lulav and the etrog in your hand and perform the mitzvah of waving the lulav and etrog as a way of praising God. You can't have somebody else do that for you. So when they do it, there's somebody else they're doing it. You're not doing it. Similarly, having conjugal relations with your partner, to the extent that that's a mitzvah, that's a bodily mitzvah if there ever was one. So nobody else can do that for you. All right. The one weird thing, of course, is the whole business of levirate marriage. Right. That's about having children on behalf of your dead brother. Right. So that's this other very weird kind of thing, but it has nothing to do with the general run of the mill kind of stuff. So putting on tefillin. Putting on tefillin is, and take this as a sign and put it on your head between your eyes, put it on your arm, and take God's words and put them on your body. You can't pay somebody else to put on tefillin for you. It's your body, not theirs. There's a classic joke that a person, Yom Kippur is coming up pretty soon, actually. So Yom Kippur is in the offing. Person goes to the shamish of the shul, right? The person who takes care of everything, does all the, the maintenance and arrangements of stuff in the shul. And goes up to the shamish and says, do me a big favor. I'll pay you $100. Fast for me for Yom Kippur. Okay. So the shamish takes the $100 and says, thank you. And then Yom Kippur comes and the guy goes to a restaurant to go eat on Yom Kippur. And lo and behold, who's on the next table? The shamish. The shamish is sitting there having a very nice meal. So the guy is like furious. And he goes, what kind of shamish are you? What kind of person are you? I paid you to fast for me. And the shamish goes, I'm not breaking your fast. I'm breaking Greenstein's fast. So that's his answer. So it's when it comes to the body, you can't just.
Well,
go up
that's
to somebody.
helpful, and it makes perfect sense. So that answers my question about this particular.
Doesn't the Torah always make perfect sense?
It does when it's
Yeah,
explained
always.
properly.
Always. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So over here, what we have here is a little bit actually coming back to, I think, a point that you made last time, which was it's very nice and holy for him to refrain from having sexual relations, but why should his wife suffer? Right. So here you have a kind of a half of an answer, right? He recognizes that this is necessary. He recognizes that this is something that he's obligated to do, but he's not doing it with all of the joie de vivre that you could bring to the to this aspect. All right. I mean, it's not exactly the most compelling answer. We'll continue with this now. We have learned.
We have learned as follows. When Joseph asks Benjamin, do you have a wife? He answered, yes, but children still lie in my future. How will I name them? For my brother, Gira and Naaman?
Gera and Naaman, that's the answer. Right? Go ahead.
Because at that time he had none. Now, if you say,
okay, so let's stop here for a second, and then we'll get to the next objection. So what we have now is recollecting that when Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers, they didn't recognize him, and he finally says, "It's me. I'm your brother. Don't you see who I am?" And then there's this whole reunion. It's very awkward. It's very tense. It's very strained. And there's Benjamin. And because they had to bring him down, that was the whole thing, that he wanted to have everybody there when to reunite the family. And he says to him, do you have a wife? So the Zohar makes up this answer, and he says, yes, I do, but we haven't had children yet. We haven't had children yet. So this is indicative, apparently, that there's some kind of withdrawal, perhaps, that so as not to have children. But in the future, I hope to have children. I will have children. And in the notes, it goes at the end of the paragraph on note 309, it goes, the text is in disarray. I follow the reading in manuscript R1, manuscript M7, CKP. That's Ketonet Paz, Ketem Paz, and various other readings. So the text that we have printed in the Zohar is a little messy, and he's cleaned it up a little bit. Other texts say, how will they be named, or something like that? And here he's saying, I'm going to name them. What am I going to name them? I'm going to name them for my brother. Who's my brother? Joseph, right? And what are the names that are chosen here as names of his sons to be called after Joseph? None of them are called Joseph, right? None of them are named Joseph. The two names that are singled out by the Zohar are Gera and Naaman. So this is from, hold on a second. Right, this is from the listing of all of the children of the tribes as they went down to Egypt. So this is 46:21. Yeah. Right, Uvenei Binyamin, Bela Vavecher Vaashbel, Geira Venaaman, Achi Varosh, Mupim Vechupim Va'ard. So the names of Benjamin's sons are all of those names. We have a lot of names here. Yeah, we're Chupim and Mupim. That's the only way they could tell them apart was because of the different names. The Chupim and the Mupim. So they have all these names here. The Zohar only singles out two of them, Geira and Naaman. Geira, possibly alluding to being a stranger, right? Having someone who had to, wander off to another place. So that would be an allusion to Joseph. Naaman is the pleasant one. And Joseph was, notable for being such a good-looking guy. But now let's look at the whole note 309.
We have learned as follows. When Joseph asked Benjamin, the Midrash recorded in Bereshit Rabbah reads differently. The sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becha, Ashbel, Hupim,
Geira and Naaman, Mechi and Rosh.
Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. When Joseph stood with Benjamin, he asked him, "Do you have sons?" He replied, "Yes." He asked him, "How many?" He replied, 10. The
Count
name,
'em. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, all of these names, there are 10 names there. So go ahead.
the names of each of Benjamin's 10 sons are then linked with Joseph's life and character. In the name of Rabbi Shmuel, son of Nachman, he asked him, "Do you have a wife?" He replied, "I have a wife and 10 sons.
Okay, so this is all from the Midrash, and then also in the Talmud, it's like that. So that's the Midrashic text. And now here,
Rabbi Elazar offers a different version in support of his view that Benjamin had not consummated his marriage. The text is in disarray. I follow the
and
reading.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He follows the different manuscripts. So what he's pointing out is that for the Zohar, they recreate a Midrash that's different than the earlier Midrash. The earlier Midrash takes it for granted that he had 10 sons, Benjamin, when he came down to Egypt, and they were all named in one way or another after Joseph. So according to the Zohar, no, that's not the case. And we have here this idea that I will name my children after Joseph, Geira, and Naaman. And I didn't have them yet. They will come in the future, right? Because at that time, he had none. Okay, so this is the Zohar doubling down on this concept that Benjamin is a tzaddik because he's not performing in bed. Now we continue to ask. Now, if you say, back to the text in the Zohar.
Now, if you say the sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becha, when they entered Egypt, it was certainly so. For as long as Jacob mourned over Joseph, he did not perform in bed, while later he did, engendering children. Rather, Benjamin thought, "Look, my brother Joseph constituted the conventional sign,
Covenantal
sign of my father, because covenant is consummation of the body. Since he has vanished, I will guard my brother's sight."
Okay, so the Zohar keeps on insisting that they want Benjamin to be in this role. The Gemara, the Zohar asks, what do you mean? He had 10 children. And you're saying he didn't have any children? Well, he had 10 children by the time they get down to Egypt. Of course, if you look in the note 312.
Later he did, engendering children. Several commentators wrestle with the problem of how Benjamin could have sired 10 sons in the short interval between his reunion with Joseph and the clan's arrival in Egypt.
Right. This is only, it's a matter of at most a month or two. And all of a sudden, poof, from having no children, he has 10 children. Yeah, it's a miracle. What can I tell you? So, but for the Zohar is undeterred. They're really just going, tying themselves into pretzels. Rabbi Elazar is tying himself into a pretzel in order to justify calling Benjamin a righteous person based on the criteria that that they have established. So now we talked about before that it's not simply abstaining from sexual relations, but there's a certain kind of sense of connection or loyalty. Before we talked about the father, right? That Benjamin understands that his father is in mourning and emotionally a wreck. So he's sort of identifying a little bit with the father. Here we have an elaboration and a slight development of that into another direction. Rather, Benjamin thought. Okay, so here's the Zohar saying, my brother Joseph constituted the covenantal sign of my father. So this is, it sounds like it's talking about, family matters, but it's talking about the divine array of powers within God. And Joseph and Jacob are the human names for aspects of God. And then they get reflected back into the real world. Joseph is the covenantal sign, the brit, the oath brit, right? The sign of the brit, of the covenant of my father. So brit means covenant. And of course, the covenantal sign is inscribed on the penis, right? Which is the generative organ of the male. So Joseph is my father, Jacob's generative organ. Right? If we look at the beginning diagram at the, in the front of the volume that we have, this is the relationship between Tiferet and Yesod. This is the body, is the trunk of the divine body is focused on Tiferet. Tiferet is Jacob, and directly down from Jacob, the extension directly down is Yesod. Yesod is the genitals. Yesod is the way that Tiferet couples with his beloved, Shekhinah. So Joseph needs to be pure and righteous in order to be the human instantiation of God's pure and righteous erotic energy. And now Benjamin says that this is the relationship between Joseph and Jacob, and now Jacob is bereft of that son Joseph. Not simply it's a sad thing because Joseph is missing, Joseph is gone, but Joseph in this very important role of being the future of Jacob is no longer around. Somebody has to then take over. And this is a little bit of a kind of a levirate idea. When the dead brother needs to be, redeemed because they have no child, the living brother comes in and marries the widow of the dead brother so that the dead brother will not have died without children. And then the posterity continues, the generative promise of the family is restored by the loyalty of the brother who's alive to the dead brother. And here the Zohar is putting it in terms of brotherly loyalty and not just father and son, filial loyalty. Right? So this is Benjamin's righteousness, obviously for the Zohar, again, narrowly focused on sexual matters, but with this, aura around it of the family connection and the loyalty, both to the father and to the brother. This is his sense of dedication. All right. Comments? We go on.
Now you might say, well, when he vanished, he was not righteous. Not until that incident befell him.
And now the he is Joseph. And Benjamin is, we're putting thoughts in Benjamin's mind. Oh, Joseph is my father's righteous one. So I'm going to have to now be the stand-in. What do you mean? So now the Zohar comes back the other way and says, let's get the chronology correct here. Joseph is not the righteous one yet. At this point, when he disappears, so Benjamin can be, all mourning and sad and loyal to his brother, but his brother is not identified as righteous. So what are you putting these kinds of formulations into Benjamin's thinking? So the answer is, however,
they all knew from Jacob, since Jacob knew that Joseph had inherited this site. That is why he prolonged his stay with Laban until the body had been consummated. Who is consummation of the body? Covenant. So it is written, when Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so I can go to my place, because the body has truly been completed, and since it has, I want to go. So Benjamin knew and guarded his brother's sight. Once Joseph was discovered, Benjamin returned to his wife and engendered children. Therefore, the Blessed Holy One established him as a righteous one below and Joseph righteous above. So Rachel gave birth to 2 sons and Leah 6 sons and a daughter. Therefore, those first years were concealed. Jacob did not perceive them since they belonged to Jubilee, while those belonging to sabbatical were revealed. For sabbatical revealed, he served Jubilee, concealed. As is written, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, 7 years unidentified. For Rachel he served 7 supernal years, embracing 2 worlds. From here we learn that through revealed, one reaches concealed.
Thank you for reading all that. I was completely out of the loop. I got frozen and I lost connection. So, but everything kept on going. That's good. Even though I vanished, you continue to maintain the connection, just like Benjamin. Good. Shkoach. I got lost, unfortunately, like I say, technical glitches here, all the way back at the top of the page and the bottom of the previous page. However, they all knew from Jacob, since Jacob knew that Joseph had inherited the site. So I lost all of those paragraphs that you read. Sorry. But you read them. So now let's try to understand them. Does anybody want to try to explain them to me? All right, so then let's start again. Okay, so what is the first thing that the Zohar now posits? Is that he had it written all over him, right? That Joseph doesn't earn his title as righteous one until later. Nevertheless, we knew that he was going to be the righteous one. Right? He was the heir apparent. Jacob knew, and Jacob told everybody else. Right? And this also colors how we imagine, if we want to mix this back into the story as we know it, what the brothers felt toward him. If the brothers all knew that Joseph was the righteous one, why are they ganging up on him? Why are they so mean to him? Why are they so resentful? If they knew, the Zohar claims that that they knew this. This was all part of a preordained destiny. So why didn't they cut Joseph some slack? Anybody? Jen, you trying to say something?
I don't know. Does knowing someone's righteous necessarily endear them more to you, or does knowing someone's more right than you necessarily endear them to you?
Don't we all love the goody-goody in class?
I don't know.
Yeah. So you're right. One thing doesn't necessarily lead to the other, for sure, and it just enhances the paradox that we notice every time we read the story. Joseph is so righteous. Why is he acting like such a disgusting, spoiled brat toward his brothers? Where is his righteousness in the beginning? So the mystery of how people develop and change and grow is part of the Joseph story. But this is a little bit of a complication. Just the fact that we know that he's going to be the righteous one doesn't let him off the hook right now in the way that he's behaving. All right. How does the Zohar know that Jacob knew all of this ahead of time? He knew it already even before Joseph was born. Okay, I'm going to get to Mark in a second. How does the Zohar prove that Jacob knew this? That is why he prolonged his stay with Laban until the body had been consummated. Who is consummation of the body? Covenant, etc. Okay, so here's the Zohar again, mixing its free and easy way of reading the story and reinventing, elements of the story, and playing with the verses when it needs to, and then it goes right back to the text and goes, look, it's right here in the text. What do we see here? We see directly one thing follows the other, right? As soon as Joseph is born, that's when Jacob says, oh, it's time to get out of here. So, despite all the other plausible explanations for that set of circumstances and that timeline, for the Zohar, this is proof positive. He's been waiting. Why did he suffer so long under Laban's harsh treatment? The answer is that before he could go back to the land of Israel, Jacob had to become, as we say later on in the text, shalem. He had to be complete. He had to be whole. Right? That was his task when he left the land of Israel. And then he had his dream. That was when he was still single. He needed to find his mate. He needed to then build the full array of powers that would fulfill his destiny as God's incarnation in this world as Tiferet. So he had to wait for the body to be completed, and then the body was completed by Joseph. Until Joseph was born, he had no full set of limbs. He knew that Joseph was the consummation of his physical development, And the consummation is the covenant, is the genital member that will allow for life to continue to the next person, to the next generation. So obviously he knew, says the Zohar, and then obviously for the Zohar, he would have told everybody, this is why we're leaving. When he calls out Rachel and Leah to the field and says, look, it's time for us to leave. How does he explain it to them for the Zohar? Clearly, he must have explained it to them that this is part of the divine plan. And now that Rachel has finally given me a child, we can go because that child is the consummation of my body. Now I want to look into the chat. I'm getting more and more confused. Leah is the upper mother. So why aren't her children more valued than Rachel's? Anybody have an answer? Anybody want to react to Mark's
The
comment?
only answer that I can see is that the job of religion on earth is primary and not the job of religion at the soprano level.
Yeah, so I don't know if I would use the word job, but yeah, that's pretty much the way, that's the punchline. Right when I tuned back in, we got to that last line. From here we learn that through revealed, one reaches concealed. You can't get to concealed first, right? You have to, Leah is the concealed one. Leah is in the realm of divinity that is really incomprehensible to us, except that we play games by, we think we can give names to it. We think we can talk about the incomprehensible. To a certain extent, that's one of the human talents, that we can talk about things we don't understand. So that's doable, but the tachlis, the real bottom line is, we do not engage with any sense of divinity through Leah. We only do it through Rachel. We only do it through Shechina.
So then,
Leah is the upper mother. Leah is the upper mother who gives birth not to human reality, but to divine reality. She's the prep for the divine reality to be able to then give birth through Rachel to a world as we know it. But until that happens, Leah has children, so to speak, but those children are abstractions. Those children are, we're going to get to it in the Zohar plays with this. The children are not real in this human sense of real, right? And of course, that's part of the play that we always have to remind ourselves. What's real, the Zohar does not dismiss the reality of humanity, of human material existence. Jacob is Jacob, and then the miracle is that Jacob is also linked into a divine reality. But without that Jacobness of flesh and blood, there'd be nothing to talk about.
so that explains the primacy of the Talmud over the Zohar.
For whom?
For religious importance.
For
Because
whose
the
religion?
Talmud
Whose
has to do-
religious importance?
No, because the Talmud has to do with life as lived, and the Zohar is sort of metaphysical speculation about the unknowable.
Yes and no.
Why
Sociologically and historically, you're right. The Talmud is preeminent as is a defining literature for Jewish living. But from the Zohar's perspective, the Talmud is secondary to its own experiences. The experiences, though, of the Zohar are not reducible to what you're saying. I mean, that's part of what I wrote my book about, but even without agreeing with me at all, the interplay between the above and below is an interplay. It's not, a one-sided deal. They're not fleeing reality in order to get up into heaven. They're constantly back here in reality And they're constantly saying that reality, the human reality, actually arouses and affects the divine reality as it flows back into the world and as it relates to itself. So the human reality is super important for the Zohar. They just have this, a perspective that's going back into the abstractions and the spiritual visions that that are super real for them and super important for them, but not to the exclusion of the physical world. This is not about running away from the world. It's not about losing yourself in an ivory tower.
So the completion of the supernal relies on the world below.
Correct.
So that
what the Zohar is trying to do is get us to realize that, so that we don't just go through a Talmudic, routinized, legalized kind of behavioral approach to life without understanding how significant that behavioral array of practices is in a spiritual way.
So that's my favorite line in Odan Olam, that the world isn't completed until God is known, but God has to be known on earth.
Through a process of human striving and falling down and messing up, the things that drive you crazy, if you'll allow me to speak to you personally.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
All right, thank you.
Well,
Yeah, David.
let me be sure I understand what we've just read. Yaakov did not leave Lavan until after Joseph was born,
Correct.
which means that 11 of the 12 sons were born, if we take them in the order in which the Torah introduces them.
Yeah.
11 of the 12 sons were born in the presence at the home of Lavan.
Right.
Which means that after 7 plus 7, even if Leah has a child a year, that's 7 more years in all likelihood of pregnancies and births. So that's already 21 years, because there are 6 sons and 1 daughter, if we take it literally.
So I can't do the math that way, but in the end, Jacob stays with Lavan approximately 20 to 21 years. Yes.
Okay, continuing then. And Jacob takes Bilhah even before. Oh, no. Do we know this? Nope. I guess we can't say that he takes Bilhah before he's married to Rachel. The timing would allow, I guess.
No, the maid servants are taken after both women are married, because that's their function. Their function is first from Rachel. First, Rachel is barren. She's married to Jacob. She has no children. She gives a maid servant to Jacob. Then Leah says, well, if that's going to be the case, we get into this sibling competition. Then she says, then I want to have a maid servant also help me on my side. So that's part of the sad sibling rivalry stuff that goes on that the Torah talks about. But in terms of chronology, back to your point, the maidservants come after the marriage to Rachel and Leah has already happened.
Okay, so okay. So they're both married, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so the children still come.
Right. This one is possible. The 10 children for Benjamin, within 2 months is not possible.
Okay, but I'm just establishing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing more. How maybe I missed this, but how is it that Jacob knows that Joseph is righteous?
Because he understands, and again, the Zohar just posits this. He understands all the way back from that dream, right? All the way back from that dream, he understands that he has a divine destiny to fulfill. And that he's not ready yet when he has the vision. The vision is to prepare him and to guide him to have a sense of purpose for what he has to do. And then his sojourn in the house of Lavan is where all of this will be accomplished, meeting the partner that he needs, the spouse. He doesn't understand, as the Zohar keeps mentioning and mentions it again over here. He doesn't understand that he actually is going to have two. And then we're going to even get to the idea of what happens to the maidservants. That'll be the next page. But he understands that he has to fulfill that destiny, and he has to become complete. That he's not complete as the divine exemplar that he is supposed to be. He's supposed to be that exemplification of Tiferet, and Tiferet is the array that completes all of the male aspects of God. He needs that Joseph, otherwise he's castrated. Otherwise he's not fully a man, and that's what he has to become.
So somehow he knows that Joseph is the one, and none of the previous 10 are.
Correct.
And he has to hang out until finally Rachel has
Right.
Joseph.
Right.
Okay. All right. If we accept this, then how do the brothers then know?
Because
that-
that's another axiom that Zohar puts out. Jacob tells the family. Right? This is
Perfect.
another added element that the Zohar makes up. The Zohar is convinced that this kind of reality had to have been communicated. This is the Torah of this family.
Yeah.
I mean, to the extent, obviously I'm saying that's made up, but in a certain sense, this is what's at stake, starting from Abraham. This is the Torah of this family. The Torah of this family, and all of the trouble that they get into and all of the difficult choices that they make, is about upholding this Torah, that they are a family that has to take upon its shoulders God themselves. They have to become the chariot on earth for God. Going back to Mark's point, they have to be able to carry God in this world. And if they don't do it, then the world is for naught. And then, of course, God is a failure. So this starts with Abraham, and that's the only way that this can happen is if it's passed down. This is, for the Zohar's point of view, this is part of what it means to give the blessing over. And now, once Jacob is the patriarch, there is no blessing per se to only one person, because Jacob has a different role. His role is to proliferate, right? His role is to create this divine array in its fullness. And then finally, and this is the Zohar's interesting point, at least to me, then he has one more son, right? He has one more son. Rachel has Benjamin on the way, right? She's pregnant with Benjamin. They leave. She gives birth to Benjamin on the road. Coincidence? I don't know. And that last baby is not essentially a divine exemplar. That baby is finally the human issue of Shekhinah. He's the righteous one below. He's the righteous mensch without becoming endowed with any other divine standing. But that's, if you want to call it from our postmodern perspective, that's the blessing and the curse of the other ones before him. Joseph is blessed and cursed with the idea that he's not just Joseph. He's also Yesod. Jacob is not just Jacob. He's also Tiferet, right? Abraham and Isaac, right? And Rachel and Leah. And to a certain degree, we've had it already with Sarah and with Rebecca, right? They have this dual identity. They are human and divine together. Benjamin is only tangentially connected to the divine. He's much more like you and me.
And the 10 brothers are top liver. They don't belong above or below.
Right. The 10 brothers will, play out their own human roles as well, because, they have things to do, but they will create in their own way the complement to Rachel's role. They will in the end constitute Shekhinah on earth, right? They will be Knesset Yisrael, but in a more weakened and distant way.
So for this to all hang together, there is a sort of a Zoharic midrash that gives us Joseph the righteous, the promulgation to the rest of the family of his righteousness, and I don't know, I thought there was a third, but it's not coming to me. But this is a Zoharic midrash that pulls all of this together and informs us.
Because this is the birth of a nation, to use a horrible title.
Yeah.
Yes, this is literally, the, continuing saga of the foundation of the Jewish people as God's beloved people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's just read again the part that we'll skip the rest of those of that short paragraph. So Rachel gave birth to 2 sons. Let's start again from there, please.
So Rachel gave birth to 2 sons, and Leah 6 sons and a daughter. Therefore, those first years were concealed. Jacob didn't perceive them, since they belonged to Jubilee, while those belonging to sabbatical were revealed. For sabbatical revealed, he served Jubilee concealed. As is written, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, 7 years. Unidentified, for Rachel he served 7 supernal years, embracing 2 worlds. From here we learn that through revealed, one reaches concealed.
Okay, so this is everything that we've been just discussing for the last few minutes. This is how the Zohar maps it out into the story in the Torah and sees these kinds of correspondences. So this is Jacob. What did he know and what didn't he know, and when did he know it and when didn't he know it? Right, that kind of thing, because we're making a claim at the beginning that he knew what was going on. But nevertheless, he thought it was going to be much more straightforward than the way it happened. And he, as we already had earlier, he was fooled, right? He was fooled by Leah. He thinks he's working for Rachel, and he ends up in the morning discovering, V'hinei Leah, actually he's married Leah. So the 7 years that he works, his kavanah, his direction, his intent, his concept of what's involved here is that he's doing God's work for the sake of uniting with Shekhinah, but God has other plans for him. And who does God work those plans out through? Lavan, right? It's Lavan who does the switcheroo on Jacob. But for the Zohar, that switcheroo is actually spiritually profound and positive, right? It's a very humbling idea that Jacob discovers finally that it's only by his intending to work for Rachel that he was able to achieve marriage with Leah. Had he not agreed to do that and undertaken to do that, none of this would have happened. But his undertaking is only half the story, right? So he thought he was doing one kind of divine mission, and he needed to do that. He needed to intend to do that divine mission. And then God ups the ante and God completely transforms his achievement into something that he never expected and could never have intended. And that's also the miracle of Shekhinah. The miracle of Shekhinah is that she is seemingly accessible, and she's the gateway to that which is inaccessible. And what we have here is not simply a straightforward, okay, so first I apprehend Shekhinah, and then I work further and I go higher and higher and higher. No, it becomes, a kind of a zigzag, right? By reaching for Shekhinah, Jacob ends up going, he has a quantum leap. Before he lands in Shekhinah, he first has to go up into the concealed, Leah. So the way the Zohar reads it is the 7 years. It doesn't say the second set of 7 years. You can read the notes. I want to just, summarize them. The pasuk, the verse doesn't say, and then he worked the second 7 years for Rachel, which is the way it happened, right? He worked the first 7 years for Rachel, but he got Leah. And then he worked the second 7 years for Rachel, and he finally got Rachel. But no, the way the Zohar reads it is that those 7 years that are mentioned second, they actually are not called the second 7 years because the Torah is trying to emphasize that that's getting Rachel required him to work those first 7 years in a fog, right? Without fully understanding what he was doing. The yearning is there, the energy is there, the devotion is there, but the achievement is not in Jacob's hands. Jacob doesn't control what he will actually take, right? The word take is a biblical word for marrying a woman, right? He doesn't control what he takes. He takes what is given to him. All right. So the revealed serves as the gateway to the concealed. But the concealed has to stay concealed, right? The concealed has to wait for all of that to happen as well. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
my little next chat, I just say, but Laban is a bad guy.
Wait, yes, that's why I pointed it out.
Okay, but that raises the whole issue of what the role of evil is.
I never shirk raising that issue. I just never solve it.
But then again, it's not that evil is somehow the residue of good. It's that good requires evil.
So this is where, again, we're not going to summarize and boil it down in a simple way. What good, what did Tolstoy say, right? All good families are boring in the same way. Something like that, right? What did he say? Does anybody remember that quote? Where's Carney when we need him?
Yeah, right.
All families are unhappy in their own way.
Right. So all families are happy in the same way, and all families that are unhappy in individual ways. Something like that. Right. And wait a second. And now just let me take a look now. When Joseph says to his brother, you meant it for evil. Yeah. Right. Very good. Yes. So it's very much in the text as well. But the point that I'm trying to say is, in a certain sense, good is boring. Right. Good is boring. And evil is exciting. All of popular culture is based on that. So, why is evil exciting? Because evil moves and goodness doesn't really move. Evil is about boundary breaking. Evil is about risk taking. Evil is about rule breaking, right? That's what's evil, right? But the problem is that actually that's more interesting. So what did we have in the Talmud? I spoke about this a few years ago, right? That when the rabbis tried to capture the evil impulse and destroy it, and then they realized they were holding it in jail, and then they saw that nobody was building a house, nobody was having children, the eggs weren't being laid, the world wasn't moving. because the evil impulse was the impulse for movement, for change, for growth, for all of that. That's why the rabbis could say, love the Lord your God with both your hearts, with your good impulse and your evil impulse. So, I mean, and this is part of what I was, I tried to lay out a little bit in what the book that I wrote about the Zohar. Movement is in some sense threatening, surprising, uncontrollable. So to the extent that we then say that movement is evil, but yes, movement is necessary and movement can be marshaled for good things. Movement, evil, having a little zip in your soul is important. Otherwise, nothing will get done. So the humor, in God's, God lacht, man tracht und God lacht, right? We think things through and we think, and then God just laughs. So the humor is that we think we know what we're doing, and that applies to good people and that applies to bad people. But v'atzat Hashem hitakum, rabot machshavot belevish, there are many, many thoughts in the heart of the human being. V'atzat Hashem hitakum, but it is the counsel of God that will eventually be come about. So, when the prophets say that Sancherib or Nebuchadnezzar are God's tool to chastise Israel, that's part of what they're saying. They think that they're building an empire, right? But we know better. We know that they're basically just playing a role in the moral struggle and drama of getting Israel, and by extension then the rest of the world, to take goodness seriously. So yes, this is part of all of these paradoxes back and forth. Lavan thinks that he's messing up, Jacob, and that he's having a laugh at Jacob, but actually Lavan is doing God's work. Right? Lavan is unbeknownst to him. Lavan is actually, in his evil designs, he's actually helping Jacob fulfill his destiny. So yes, so that's the same with Lavan. And now we have one more. I know Craig remembers on Star Trek when Kirk was split in two, his good impulse and his evil impulse. And good Kirk was completely ineffective. Yes, and Craig is nodding his head, right? Some of this, spoiler alert, some of this is playing out in The Good Place. For those of you who are watching The Good Place, this is part of the comedy. This is part of that, entertainment as we watch these flips back and forth. So, all right. So the place of evil is a complicated thing, but like the Golem story, right? The Golem story is a story about trying to think that you can control massive power, that you can direct it and that you can constrain it. And that's the other side of evil. Evil does not want to be used and constrained. Evil wants to break all of those boundaries. And that's what makes evil evil. Right? Instead of evil saying, I want to be a loyal servant, Eved Ne'aman, like Moses said, use me for your will, use me for your designs, use me for your goals. Then that would be perfect. But evil doesn't want to do that. So sometimes evil accomplishes what it needs to accomplish. And of course, look at the angel of death. The angel of death is sent to kill people. Right? The angel of death is sent on a divine mission to bring people to their death. But then sometimes, the angel of death gets a little full of itself. And that's the idolatry. That's the denying of letting God call the shots and then trying to take over. That's the myth of the fallen angels. We have at the beginning of Genesis, that we have in so many other cultures as well. That we have in early apocalyptic Jewish literature, the books of Enoch. Right? This idea that you have an interesting role to play, and it's not enough. So okay, yeah.
Are you going to address?
Wait. Beryl and then David.
How does Jubilee and sabbatical roll into all of this?
That's my
So-
question as well.
Okay, so Jubilee and sabbatical. So Jubilee and sabbatical are names, along with many other names, for different aspects of God. Sabbatical is another name for Shekhinah. Sabbatical is the seventh, and Shekhinah is the seventh of the divine centers of energy, if we don't count the 3 ones that you can't even think about. Right? There are 10, right? So there are 10 sfirot. If you look at the diagram, Keter, Chokhmah, and Binah are the top 3, and they are incomprehensible no matter how much I talk about them. Then you've got 7 lower sfirot, starting with Chesed. The 7th and last sfira is Shekhinah, so she's the 7th. Coincidence that she's the 7th? How important 7 is in our tradition. So that's why time is organized in 7-year cycles. The Shemitah idea is to create a Shabbat, just like the 7th day is Shabbat, so too the 7th year is Shabbat. What is Shabbat? When everything that you've done the rest of the week comes to a rest within that 7th day. Everything that God engenders and pours forth comes into the 7th aspect of God, and that 7th aspect contains everything that came before it. So that's Shekhinah equals Shemitah. Can you just buy that as a kind of an interesting correspondence? So now, besides that, we know that in the Torah, there's also Yovel, Jubilee. Yovel is Shemitah on steroids, right? Yovel is 7 times 7 and then Yovel, right? That's the 50th year, right? 7 times 7 is 49 years, 7 Shmitot combined to make Yovel. Yovel is the time of the proclamation of complete freedom, and everything goes back to where they come from. So that means that Yovel is the source, is the time of returning to the source. Who is the source? The upper mother. Binah is the upper mother. Our tradition says that there are 50 gates of wisdom. Why 50? Because Binah, which is wisdom, understanding, whichever one you want to choose, 50 gates of understanding. Binah is the 50. 50 is Yovel, just like 7 is Shekhinah. Yovel is the time of return. That's the time of tshuva. So she's also called tshuva. So everything in the end would come back to the original mother, the original womb, which is Binah, which is, or who is, the partner with God in an inseparable way. Everything that we live now is, as we talked about many times, a time of dynamism, and dynamism means separation. So we are in the Alma de Piruda. We are in the world of separation. Nothing is unified unless we force it to be unified. So we struggle and struggle to say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We struggle for unification. That's what God made out of this world, a world that's separate, that strives to reunite and create union. If we ever were able to finally create union that's stuck, that would be Yovel. That's Binah. So these are the, in a nutshell, these are the ways that Binah gets to be called Yovel and Shekhinah gets to be called Shemitah. And we've talked about it before also. Shemitah is given, it's out there, historically experienced. Shekhinah is the accessible part of God in this world. Binah is Yovel. Yovel is a myth. Yovel has never been remembered as being actually lived and experienced, but it's a real concept. It's a real value. That's Binah. All right, we'll stop for tonight, and we'll hopefully be able to hold on for this to this for next time as well.
Oh.
All right, sei gesund.